Welcome back to more Use Your Fantasy content. This will be my latest draft for the Champions League. That matchday 1 deadline is looming, and I will be going live around 2 hours before kickoff on that Tuesday, so make sure not to miss it and all my other Use Your Fantasy and FPL videos by liking this podcast on YouTube, subscribing to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content for both fantasy formats, which will be covered throughout this season, and check all the other links in the description for my Patreon and the championships. For links to my videos, amongst many other perks, you can click the join button on YouTube or type in patreon.com/FPL Dylan. There's my Discord server, the Use Your Fantasy League, which you can see on screen. The code is SEINOF, and that auto-join link makes it even simpler. And also check out my content on Spotify. Leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way to supporting the channel. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. All the rules in Use Your Fantasy are covered in my How to Play guide and also my chip strategy videos. There was one I made last season, but also one for the upcoming campaign. I'd highly recommend you check them out. We start off with a 100 million budget going into match day 1. We get that 5 million increase in the knockout stages, and as we approach that stage, I'll inform you, of course, so you're well prepared for the extra boost in budget. But I'm going to start off with the 2 goalkeepers for the league phase, and with that chip strategy I discussed in that recent podcast, I think that could also inform our decisions of how we set up in match day 1. So you can essentially build a free hit team for the opening match day and then wildcard around match day 2 and really optimize your Use Your Fantasy squads. If you decide to follow that strategy, I'd highly recommend targeting those plum fixtures for the likes of Benfica and another team I'll talk about very soon, and going for Trubin facing Qarabag at home. Benfica are ranked 2nd in the clean sheet odds, only behind Sporting this week, and I think they'll have a great opportunity to keep that clean sheet, so doubling up on the defence is viable. You might want to go for Trubin and one of their defenders, which I'll discuss very soon, and the same goes for another Portuguese side in Sporting, and going for the 5 million goalkeeper in Rhys Silva. Their upcoming fixtures, of course, won't be that great after match day 1, but what you can do, of course, is wildcard them out in match day 2. But if you aren't prepared to do that sort of thing and use the chips so early on, I don't recommend going for this goalkeeper pairing. You might get a few surprising clean sheets here and there, but ultimately, if you are targeting the fixtures, you might want to go for more reliable teams like Arsenal, even Tottenham Hotspur potentially, and going for Vicario in goal. But there's also other options where that came from, like Chevalier and Joan Garcia at 4.5 million. They offer great value on paper, but PSG's fixtures are terrible, which I also talked about in my chip strategy guide, and I rank all the teams in terms of the FDR from match days 1 to 8. And there's also Alisson Becker for Liverpool costing 6 million, and Jan Sommer, who for the first half of the league phase looks really enticing. But I think for match day 1 specifically, Rhys Silva and Trubin are amongst the best goalkeepers in the game. One of the few players who kept this spot from my Update Draft podcast is Jurrien Timber. He only cost 5 million, but the ceiling is certainly there. He produced a mega haul in FPL back in Game Week 2 against Leeds United, scoring a brace and getting an assist. He was the highest scoring player in FPL that week, and I think he'll be a very good Use of Your Fantasy asset when he does play. But Ben White will be in the Arsenal squad this weekend against Nottingham Forest, if the reports are true, because he was in training over the last couple of days, and we could see rotation in that right back spot, particularly in the Champions League. So Timber isn't the safest pick. The same goes for Calafiori at 4.5 million. He just won the Arsenal Player of the Month award. He scored their opening goal in the Premier League against Man United. And Gabriel has the highest ceiling. He scored against Sporting last season in the Champions League and got a lot of ball recoveries. And William Saliba is currently out injured. Him and Saka weren't spotted in training very recently, but I think Mosquera could do a very good job in match day 1 against Athletic Bilbao away. But ultimately, the safest pick is Gabriel at 5.5 million. So if you do have an extra 0.5 flying around, it might be worth going for Gabriel if you are looking for that long-term pick in that Arsenal defence. But the next option will be from Real Madrid, and he's a quite template option with 16% ownership in Dean Howson, who had an incredible campaign for Bournemouth last season. And his start for Real Madrid has been a bit mixed bag, of course. He was sent off in the Club World Cup, but in La Liga this season, he has helped them keep clean sheets and rise to the top spot in that table. And I think Dean Howson at 4.5 million offers tremendous value in that Real Madrid defence. They also have great fixtures for the opening 2 match days, facing Marseille at home and Kara Almaty away. But he also facilitates that early wildcard in match day 2, so it doesn't really matter anyway. He's going to get ball recoveries, maybe not so much in terms of goals or assists, but he scored against the likes of Man United and Tottenham Hotspur last season for Bournemouth, so he definitely has that capability of scoring from set pieces. The same goes for another centre-back, so all these defenders are quite similar in terms of their play style. With Nicolas Otamendi, who costs 5 million and his ownership is 7%, this would form a double up in the Benfica defence, which is viable for matchday 1, but not so much in future match days. So be very careful about this. Don't just copy this team and think, oh, this is going to be perfect for the first 8 match days. This would facilitate a matchday 2 wildcard and really target that Carabao fixture in matchday 1. Now, Nicolas Otamendi was sent off against Ecuador for Argentina in their recent qualifier, but before that, he was looking really solid for club and country, and in the Club World Cup, he was a very decent asset in that fantasy game as well, and he can get a lot of ball recoveries, and in general, he got 63 points last season, so he does go under the radar because he has those bozo moments. Unfortunately, he picks up a lot of yellow cards as well, but ultimately with Otamendi, you can get the odd goal, especially in crucial moments, and you can also get ball recoveries on a regular basis. Even in those difficult games coming up for Benfica, he can give you those additional points through ball recoveries and be one of the best defenders in the league phase. But the next two are going to be there for the attacking potential and their premiums. Denzel Dumfries is one of them, facing Ajax away in matchday 1, which isn't the best fixture overall, but it's still decent in the grand scheme of things. And between matchdays 2 and 4, Inter Milan have the best fixtures of any team throughout the league phase, but there's a massive fixture swing in matchday 5, so by that stage you could argue that Dumfries is a sell, but he also scored a brace against Barcelona in the Champions League semi-finals last season. And Achraf Hakimi has had a poor start to this season, but he is still one of the best defenders in world football, especially when it comes to attacking potential. Now, compared to Denzel Dumfries, he doesn't have the form because the Dutchman scored for the Netherlands over the international break and also in Inter Milan's recent Serie A game, which they lost. But Hakimi is performing in one of the best sides in world football, who destroyed Inter Milan in that Champions League final. And between those two teams, whilst PSG don't have the fixtures and Hakimi doesn't have the form, he certainly has the ability, and PSG are still winning games without Hakimi playing at his very best. But this defensive line looks incredible for matchday 1. Of course, PSG facing Atalanta at home isn't the best of fixtures, and we could see the Parisians concede at home, but their attacking potential is still insane, even with the likes of Dembele and Doué injured for the next month, and it looks like Dembele's injury is even more serious, and he could miss the next 6 weeks worth of action. And Hakimi provides a decent captaincy option on the 17th of September on the Wednesday. And remember, for matchday 1, we have 3 opportunities at the captaincy, so you can pick one player from the Tuesday, the Wednesday and the Thursday when it comes to the captaincy, and also make substitutions in the process. With Tottenham Hotspur being ranked 2nd in the FDR until matchday 8, I think the likes of Xavi Simons could be good long-term punts. The only problem here is that he just joined Tottenham Hotspur and he might be eased into things, so if he starts against West Ham this weekend, we could even see him benched against Villarreal at home in matchday 1 of the Champions League. So this isn't going to be the most secure pick, and if you want someone more reliable in terms of the minutes right now, Kudus might be your man, but he doesn't look like scoring at this moment in time. That could change against West Ham, of course, facing his former club, but in the grand scheme of things, Kudus will only get you assists and the minutes, whilst the likes of Kolo Muani and Richarlison will battle it out up front. They might even play together on certain occasions, and Xavi Simons can play as an attacking midfielder and also on the left-hand side, but we don't know exactly where he's going to play yet in this Tottenham team, so it might be worth waiting a little bit before investing in Xavi Simons, but having a Spurs attacker is still viable considering their fixtures, and he only costs 6.5 million. Xavi Simons has a lot of potential. He showed it in UCL Fantasy a couple of years ago, but last season he only got 10 points and didn't play many minutes overall. Vinicius Jr. is also in this team, and one of the key aspects of this matchday 1 free hit essentially is to double or triple up on Real Madrid, and you might even consider doubling up on their attack with Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe, but it all depends on your structure and how you want to go about things if you think Marseille is going to be a promising fixture for Real Madrid, and I believe that will be the case. So Vinicius at 9.5 million and reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, he looks really enticing for matchday 1 and especially against Kara Almaty in matchday 2 as well. Speaking of which, you can do the same thing in matchday 1 with Pedro Gonçalves facing Kara Almaty at home and Sporting are top of the clean sheet odds, but in terms of the goal scoring, they'd also be right up there amongst all teams in the opening matchday. And you might even have this debate about Pedro Gonçalves versus teammate Trincao, but on a free hit in matchday 1 essentially, and remember this is not a chip because you can't use any boosters anyway in matchday 1, and the limitless and wildcard can only be used in the league phase between matchdays 2 to 8. But ultimately, what you can do here if you wildcard in matchday 2 is build a team specifically for matchday 1 and not worry about the rest of the league phase and go for a double up in the Sporting midfield with both Trincao and Pedro Gonçalves in the heart of that midfield. Now, if I had to pick between these two, I think Pedro Gonçalves is the better player and his ceiling is higher. He scored a hat-trick very recently, but he has been up and down since a long-term injury he suffered, and the consistency just isn't there yet. Many Sporting fans will tell you that Trincao is the more consistent player right now, but I still think Pedro Gonçalves has the higher ceiling, and if I had to pick one of them, I think Gonçalves is more likely in my final setup. I also talked about Luis Suarez in my updated draft. He scored 4 goals for Colombia against Venezuela in a World Cup qualifier, and his start to his Sporting career has been a little bit mixed bag, but he can score goals, and he will be a decent Gyökeres replacement, but not score 97 goals in 102 games like the Swedish striker did, of course, throughout the last couple of years. But the final midfielder in this 50-man squad is going to be from PSG, and Kvaratskhelia looks very enticing, and he was really good, of course, for PSG towards the back end of last season, and he helped them win the Champions League with multiple contributions in the knockout stages. So going for 2 PSG players on a matchday 1 free hit looks incredible, I think, and it would separate you from the rest of the crowd. The same goes for doubling up on that Benfica defence with Trubin and Otamendi, and having this sort of setup with Trincao and Gonçalves. And guess what? There's another double up in the attack with Vinicius Jr. and one of the best strikers in world football. In my recent Use Your Fantasy videos, I ranked Kylian Mbappe as the best captaincy option for matchday 1. It would be difficult to pick between him and Vinicius because they both have the same fixture, and I would argue that Vinicius has had a better start to this season than Kylian Mbappe. But the Frenchman doesn't need to play well to score goals. He does it so regularly for France and Real Madrid over the years, and his record for PSG and Monaco also speaks for itself. But I think he's a great option for matchday 1 and 2, and even in difficult fixtures like Man City and Liverpool coming up, he can still deliver the goods on a regular basis, and his Champions League record is only bettered by the likes of Erling Haaland. But Pavlidis also makes it into this team. He isn't the most secure pick, and he was incredible last season for Benfica. He scored a hat-trick against Barcelona in the home fixture, but ultimately his minutes could be under jeopardy because he hasn't had a good start to this season. He was even benched on one occasion, and this could happen in the Champions League as well. But facing Qarabag, the ceiling is certainly there, and if I had to pick one Benfica attacker, it would certainly be Pavlidis. He scored for Greece over the international break, and the hope is they can translate that into the Champions League this season and revive his club career with Benfica. Now, João Pedro at 7.5 million is a bit of a doubt going into Brentford because of the long travel distances between Brazil and England, and the same can happen with a lot of players after this international break. But in the Champions League facing Bayern Munich away, you would expect him to start, and he could be considered in your teams, but that's more so for the matchday 2 to 4 fixtures. If you are wildcarding in matchday 2, I'd rather go for Pavlidis over João Pedro to target that plum fixture against Qarabag at home. But the final player has a difficult game on paper, facing Napoli at home, but Erling Haaland is an absolute beast. He scored 5 goals for Norway and provided 2 assists in an 11-1 win for Norway. It was an incredible performance, and he now has more goals than games played for Norway in the Champions League, and for Man City, it's quite close in terms of scoring 1 every single game. His records are absolutely incredible, and I think he'll end up as the top scorer in Champions League history if he can stay fit. Facing Napoli at home, it will be difficult, but the ceiling will still be there, and on the 18th of September, he remains one of the best captaincy options on that Thursday. Having him and Mbappe in the same team, whilst also fitting in Vinicius Jr., Kvaratskhelia, 2 premium defenders in Hakimi and Dumfries, and having some of the best options for matchday 1 specifically, targeting fixtures at Kara Almaty and Qarabag looks really enticing, and that could really play into the hands of those wildcarding in matchday 2. Before I discuss the starting 11 and the captaincy with that 50-man squad, let's discuss some alternatives for those that don't want a wildcard in matchday 2. A goalkeeper pairing of Vicario and Alisson looks very solid up until matchday 7 when they both play at the same time, and it's inevitable to have 2 goalkeepers playing at the exact same time in matchday 8 because guess what? Every single team has the exact same time for their fixture. That's something I've discussed in all of my videos, especially that chip strategy guide, which will be very useful to you so you can plan out the best time to use the wildcard and limitless, but I wouldn't be using the latter chip in matchday 8 as discussed in that video, but the group stages is a great time to deploy that booster and get over 100 points in the process. So Vicario and Alisson is a solid goalkeeper pairing up until matchday 7, and I discussed all the potential rotations you can have in this position in my update draft video. Now, a back 5 are Dumfries, Bachor, who can get so many ball recoveries, Calafiori, Howson and Otamendi still looks very solid, so it's identical to what I discussed in this video. Calafiori for Timber is one of the key changes. The same goes for Baccio in for Hakimi, and that gives you more money to spend in the midfield. For the likes of Elise, you can go for Arda Güler here and keep Pedro Gonçalves or Trincao, and as I mentioned before, my preference is with Pedro Gonçalves. Kevin De Bruyne is also in this team, and after matchday 1, his fixtures look very appealing. Napoli are ranked top of the FDR throughout the entire league phase, and having Yamal in this team would also give you more confidence because he is one of the best players in world football. Now, this might be a different looking front three to what you're used to. There's no Mbappe, Haaland or Harry Kane, who should definitely be considered. Even Guirassy at 8 million arguably offers better value than most of these forwards, but Lautaro Martinez has incredible fixtures for the first 4 match days, and he provides a decent captaincy option on the Wednesday. Victor Gyökeres is also decent on the Tuesday, on the 16th of September, and I think he could be quite underrated. He got 6 goals in 8 Champions League games last season. That included a hat-trick against Man City at home, and Joao Pedro looks very appealing from match days 2 to 4, but against Bayern Munich away, I think there are better options where that came from. So what you can see here is the pool of players to really hone in on. By watching this video and my other drafts, you have a great idea of the best players in every single position with multiple differentials, the best fixtures, and this is all talked about in my chip strategy guide as well. The ability to make substitutions and change the captaincy is what separates UCL Fantasy from FPL, and that's why I'm going for a back 5 in the starting 11 with Trubin in goal, who plays on the Tuesday, and everyone on my bench plays on the Thursday, the 18th of September. The likes of Dumfries, Hakimi, Timber, Howson and Otamendi is very solid. You've got a mixture of ball recoveries, clean sheet potential and the odd goal or assist, especially in the case of Dumfries and Hakimi. The midfield three comprise of Vinicius Jr., Kvaratskhelia and Xavi Simons, with Mbappe as the first captain, Pavlidis completing that starting 11, and then having Rhys Silva, Francisco Trincao, Pedro Gonçalves and Haaland on that bench. Now, in terms of backup captaincy options on the 17th and 18th, I would consider a PSG player against Atalanta at home, so either Kvaratskhelia or Hakimi, and my preference would be Hakimi, despite his lack of form. And on the 18th, you've got those Sporting attackers, which look very enticing, but I'd still go for Erling Haaland at home, facing Napoli. And the only downside I see with this team really is not having Lamine Yamal, and even in a fixture like Newcastle away, he could produce a massive return. But this is specifically designed for a matchday 2 wildcard. Remember that some of these picks can still be quite solid in matchdays 2 and 3, but long term there could be some other issues and lack of Liverpool coverage, for example, and certain factors that might put you off this sort of squad. But ultimately your chip strategy will inform some of your matchday 1 selections, and it's very important to check out that video to get the full picture of the league phase, and you can identify the best fixtures, players and clubs for the first 8 match days of this season. We have reached the end of the latest and final draft of UCL Fantasy, and the next podcast headed your way will be the team selection for matchday 1. If anything happens over the weekend with injuries or other factors, they'll be taken into account, and there could be a slight tweak to my chip strategy because, as discussed in that video, nothing is penciled in just yet, and the Limitless, for example, could be used slightly earlier than I talked about, and with the wildcard, instead of matchday 2, it could be deployed later in the league phase. But my recommendation is to use both chips early, especially in the case of the Limitless. Don't use it in matchday 8 or later in the competition. That would be the advice I give, just like last season. And be sure to check out all my FPL and UCL Fantasy content by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and also hitting that notification bell so you're always up to date with my content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Keep your eyes peeled for that Tuesday deadline stream, and the same goes for FPL content over the next couple of weeks. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships, for links to my videos, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for the next UCL Fantasy deadline stream and the team selection, and the same goes for FPL videos next week.